Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Now, before we start the next lecture, I would like to know if there is any problem in understanding the first, second, and third one. If it is so, please let me know so that I can clear your doubts. Aman Singh, Shashank Shekhar, Priyanshu Agarwal, Adarsh Katuri, Abhimanyu Prajapati. If you have any doubt, you please let me know so that before the start of the next one, we can this one we can start we can clear the doubts. So in the last turn, we have finished up to the Bohm calorimeter and its final corrected equation, which was this, where the fuse wire correction, acid correction, and the TC, that is cooling correction, has been explained, and the relevance of small w was also discussed. Now, coming over to the Boyle's gas calorimeter, before we start this discussion, let us be very clear that whether it is Boyle's gas calorimeter or a Bohm calorimeter, in both these methods, we are bringing the product of combustion to room temperature so that the water vapor get condensed back to liquid water, and therefore the latent heat of condensation of steam is added into the determined calorific value. And that is why it is both, whether from Bohm calorimeter or Boyle's gas calorimeter, you are getting higher calorific value or gross calorific value. Higher or gross calorific value. So whether it is this one or the earlier one, the vertical section of the Boyle's calorimeter is, you can see here in this slide, you can see here that this one which I am putting here with the arrow, you see, this is a calorimeter which is made up of copper, and it is like a chimney. It is like a chimney made up of copper, provided with on the inside wall with the packing material by which we can prevent the heat loss to the surrounding, isn't it? So this is the copper calorimeter. Here you can find inside this there is water inlet which is attached to a spiral copper tubing. This is spiral. You see, whatever we are showing you, it is a cut section. The entire calorimeter is like a cylinder, isn't it? Oxygen cylinder or any other cylinder, isn't it? Inside it, this is water inlet, and inside this there is a spiral copper tubing in which water is flowing, isn't it? From bottom to top, isn't it? From bottom to top, water is circulating around this chamber, this wall, isn't it? And it is also here also in the rest of the space, here, and we'll find that the water, yeah, copper tubings are there. Spiral tubing of copper is there, which comes finally here, and then water which was entered through this inlet will go off from the top here, and it may be collected here, and it may be or it is collected in a container or cylinder here. So whatever water you have circulated during that interval of time, that will be collected here. The temperature of the outgoing water you can record here as T4, and the temperature of inlet water it can be recorded as in this mercury pocket, where you can see it is T3. So T3 is the inlet temperature of water, T4 is the outlet temperature of water. Then this water is flowing, you see, if you see the diagram, because water is coming from here and then you maintain a level here, so the flow of water will be constant, isn't it? The flow of water will be constant, or you can put a valve here which will control the flow of water, isn't it? A constant flow of water will be maintained here, isn't it? Then whatever, here you have a gas tank where fuel is filled, whether it is a volatile liquid fuel or a, just a minute. So here you have gas tank in which fuel is filled, whether it is a volatile liquid or a gaseous fuel, and it comes to this pipe through this outlet, and here you have a manometer by which you can note down the pressure of the gas, isn't it? And then this fuel pipe is connected with a flow meter, gas flow meter. It's not gas meter, it is a gas flow meter. So where by which you can maintain a specific flow of the gas. Then you can record the temperature of the gas which is coming here as a T1. Then it goes into this burner which is attached to the calorimeter, Boyle's gas calorimeter. So the gas which you want to determine, the fuel gas for which you want to determine the calorific value, comes to this burner, and you can ignite this burner by a simple lighter or matchstick. You can start this combustion by a lighter. So this gas will start burning, and whatever product of combustion are because there may be a product of combustion is certainly it is carbon dioxide. Then product of combustion is water vapor, because hydrogen will undergo combustion to produce water vapor. Then there may be oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, isn't it? Air is also coming, so from here air is also coming, and therefore complete combustion will take place. That is, the final combustion products are formed. It's not carbon monoxide, it will be carbon dioxide which is formed. Now this carbon dioxide and oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, water vapor which are produced, they will spread to entire calorimeter, isn't it? Entire calorimeter, and then because cooling is and the water is coming from this, the flow of water is also fixed, the flow of gas is also fixed, so that these gases which are at high temperature, they will be cooled down, isn't it? Because water is circulating. So heat evolved by the combustion process will be absorbed by this flowing water, isn't it? Which will rise from bottom, from the lower portion, and then it will rises up to the top, and then it comes to this aperture, and where from here it is allowed to be collected here into this this container. This is the graduated flask. So graduated flask, you will be able to know that what volume has been collected. So now here you have inserted the thermometer, so you can note down the temperature of this water which is outgoing water. This is temperature of incoming water T3, and this is temperature of outgoing water. Now the gases which have been cooled down, naturally when we cool down, only water will be converted from water vapor to liquid water. Carbon dioxide or oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, they will not be cooled down to liquid. So only thing is that water vapor will be condensed back to room temperature and will change phase from water vapor to liquid water. And now this liquid water and the gases will come here, isn't it? Liquid water will be collected here. Liquid water, that is condensed water. There are two types of water. This water is not from here. This water is not from here. So this water is not from this water. This is the circulating water, and this water has produced as a result of combustion of hydrogen, so that water vapors are generated by the combustion of the fuel, and then they are collected here, condensed back, and the gases will also go out, exhaust gases, and the water will be condensed here. So normally the temperature T1 of the gas and T2, they are almost same, isn't it? Because whatever the temperature has risen up due to combustion process has been absorbed by the circulating water, isn't it? Circulating water, and yes, also it should be absorbed by the material of the calorimeter. I will come to know, explain you why in the equation we have not entered into this. Okay, so this is how the what will happen. So that you will collect W mass of water here. You can measure the volume since the density is 1. So you will be able to know that how much gram or kg of water has been circulated and how much water has been condensed. You can also know this. So with this arrangement, you have chemical equation which is H3V, as I have already told you, that it will give you H3V because water is condensed back to room temperature or liquid water. So it is not LCV, it is H3V. So H3V is equal to capital W. Now you see, this is the capital W, this water here, water out, isn't it? It's a measuring cylinder. So you know that how much volume of water has been collected here, which is circulating water has been collected here. So that is capital W here, capital W, isn't it? And T4 minus T3, you see, here you have the temperature of inlet water, you see, T3, isn't it? It will be room temperature. Then it goes in and absorb the heat which has been produced as a result of combustion of the fuel, and it will absorb, the temperature will rise, and you will get the T4 temperature, which is the raised temperature, which has been raised to T4. So here again, this is the equation is W multiplied by T4 minus T3 divided by V. What is the V? V is the volume of gas which has been burnt in a limited time period, isn't it? Because we are doing this experiment for say 3 minutes to 4 minutes, maximum 5 minutes, isn't it? We are doing this experiment only for 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes. So you note down the pressure of this gas container, isn't it, at time 0, T0, P0, P at time 0. Then after completing the experiment for 4 or 5 minutes, you again note down the pressure of this gas, isn't it? The pressure of this gas. Then you will be able to know that how much the pressure is after time t. So from the pressure at time 0, pressure at time t, you will note down. The difference of the pressure will give you the volume of the gas which has been burnt for this time period, isn't it? So that volume of gas which is burnt for a time period t is given here in the form of, in the denominator. So it is HCV is equal to W into T4 minus T3 divided by V. So this is here. Now, if you want to determine the LCV from the same experiment, we have collected the water. How much water? Which has been produced for the volume by burning the gas of volume V, So this is the mass of gas which has been produced, mass of the water which has been collected here, condensed here for V volume of the gas, and therefore here it is HCV which we have determined from here, isn't it? Minus M prime. M prime is the mass of water which has been condensed here, steam condensed. It's not this water. This is steam condensed. This divided by V, mass of water condensed by V volume of the gas. V volume of the gas, then multiplied by 587, which is the, as I told you earlier, there is the latent heat of condensation of steam per unit mass of the fuel, per unit mass of the water. So that is 587. So you can determine LCV. Now, if you see this equation, this one, here what is missing is this one. Here you can see that earlier equation was capital W plus small w. So why there is no small w here? The question is why there is no small w. You see, the heat, whether it is bomb calorimeter or a Boyce calorimeter, will be absorbed by two things. One is circulating water or water which is present in the bomb calorimeter around the bomb, isn't it? Surrounding water, or it is a Boyce gas calorimeter. Heat will also be absorbed by material of the calorimeter, isn't it? By why? But then why there is no small w in this equation, and there is a small w here in this equation? The reason is that we do this experiment uh, by smartly conducting the experiment. What we do before the real experiment, before the real experiment, what we do, we burn some gas, unknown amount, isn't it? Here, there's no need to note down the pressure. We keep the flow of gas constant. We are keeping the flow of inlet water constant. We'll burn this gas. We'll light with the lighter. So there is no need of a fuse wire. So I will come to it that those corrections are not required, isn't it? So it is burned by the ignited. The gas is ignited, and it will, what it will do, the combustion reaction will take place. The combustion products are formed, and heat will be evolved in the combustion process. That will increase the temperature of, and that heat will be absorbed by all the material of the calorimeter and the circulating water. What happens? Initially, when you do this, isn't it? This temperature T4 will keep on changing, isn't it, initially? But after some time, this T4 will become constant. After some time, this T4 will become constant. Why? Because you are keeping the gas flow to a fixed level. You are keeping the flow of water, inlet water, to a fixed level, isn't it? So first, initially, the temperature will rise from T3 to T31, 3, 3, like this, isn't it? But finally, because we are maintaining the flow of the water and flow of the burning gas, so therefore, a constant T4 will be attained. When a constant T4 is attained, what does it mean? That whatever that T4 is attained means whatever heat was absorbed by the material of the calorimeter has already absorbed this heat, has already absorbed the heat. So T4 is not changing, isn't it? Because flow of gas, you see how after constant, attending a constant T4, how the T4 can change. It can only be changed if you increase the flow of this gas. Then T4 will increase, isn't it? Similarly, if you increase the or decrease the flow of water, again the T4 will increase, isn't it? So when you are fixing this to a known level, a fixed level, flow of inlet water and flow of the burning gas, burning gas, then after some time a constant T4 will attain, isn't it? Now at this, when a constant T4 is attained, then you will start the real experiment. And till that time, you will not collect this water, you will not collect the condensed steam. You will allow it to go waste. The water which you have collected, there is no need to collect this water up till you have got a constant T4. Once a constant T4 is attained, then you can start your real experiment. So what you will do? You will first of all measure the pressure of the gas here, because you are starting it, so that time is 0. So T0, P, pressure of the gas at T0, you can time 0, you can note down. Then you run the experiment, you collect this water which is flowing here, you collect the condensed steam, isn't it? And then you do the experiment for 3-4 minutes. 3-4 minutes you do the experiment. Then what will happen? And you collect this water which has been flown, that is circulated. You can collect the steam which has been condensed. Now T4 will remain T4. T4 will remain T4 because you are not increasing the flow of this or flow of this. So that will be maintained T4. Now you do this experiment for 5 minutes. After that, you close down this gas. You shut this valve, and the gas will not be flowing anymore, isn't it? From here, and you note down the pressure of the gas, isn't it? After time t, the difference of pressure after time 0 and time t, the volume will be known. Volume can be determined. Then you have, when you stop the gas, you have stopped the flow of water. So this water which has been collected here will be remain here, and condensed steam which have been collected, you can collect it here. You know the volume of condensed steam, of mass can determine. You know the volume of the circulating water. The mass of water W can be determined. Now, therefore, now you can see there is no need of small w here, because you have done the real experiment when a final temperature T4 has been attained. A final temperature T4 has been attained. So now no heat will be further absorbed by the material of the calorimeter, isn't it? So a capital W is a sufficient parameter for determining this, T4 minus T3, and then divided by V. This I told you. Then what about other corrections? You see, here you have TC. We will discuss about TC. Small w we have already discussed. Now you see that you have there is no need of a fuse wire correction, because in this experiment no fuse wire has been used. Only you have ignited this gas by a spark, isn't it? A spark from a lighter, and that heat produced by the spark is negligible, isn't it? So there is no need for any correction. So no fuse wire correction. Then what happened? The acid correction. Why you did acid correction in bomb calorimeter? If you say in bomb calorimeter, this entire thing is closed. It's closed. So high pressure is there, high temperature is there, then water is there, which is condensed for will be remain there for longer time. So it will, the time required for the reaction of oxides of nitrogen and sulfur with water is large. At the same time, the pressure is high, temperature is high. So in that condition, water reacts with oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, and therefore produce acid, and that is why we do the acid correction. But here you can see, the gases which are here, isn't it? They are soonly cooled down because the chimney height is very good. A good height of the chimney is there. At the same time, pressure will not develop here. Large pressure will not develop here. And the time required for mixing is also very low, because the oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, water is circulating, so this will condense back to liquid water, isn't it? So enough time is also not there by which the gases here, oxides of sulfur and nitrogen, could react. And the major reason why it will not be reacting is the pressure, absence of pressure. So pressure is not here, so therefore the oxides of nitrogen and sulfur will not react with water molecule, water vapor, to give you the sulfuric acid and nitric acid. And therefore, if there is some acid formation because of the temperature, that will be negligible, or at all, I think there is a, because in absence of a sufficient pressure, this reaction will not take place at all. So therefore, there is no requirement of a acid correction here. So no acid correction, no fuse wire correction is required here. No small W is required in this situation. What about TC? You see what happened? Here you can see that you are measuring the, first of all, this entire calorimeter is very well insulated, and you see in the earlier calorimeter the same water was contained inside the bomb calorimeter for a longer time, where the temperature has risen to higher temperature and it has come down to room temperature. So time required for cooling and rising the temperature is large. Here you can see the water enters here, gets circulated here and comes out, isn't it? Comes out. So the time required, and it is very well insulated also. So therefore time required for cooling or transferring the heat to the surrounding is minimum, isn't it? Is negligible. But whatever rise in temperature is there, you can see if there is any difference between T1 and T2, then that correction has to be taken into consideration. So that is why you can see there is no TC, or if TC is there, that will be corrected here, isn't it? The difference of temperature will be added here, isn't it? So that is why HCV is given in this form of calorimeter is this. So now, is there any question about it? So from this setup, you will be able to know the HCV first and then LCV simultaneously by knowing the mass of water which has been condensed, isn't it? This water condensed, and therefore LCV can be easily determined. Now let me first of all take the attendance and then so attendance I have taken. Is there any doubt to any of you?
So which calorimeter gives accurate value of calorific value?
Both of them gives you the accurate value of calorific value. First thing, you see, and the type of sample which is needed for both of them are different. In bomb calorimeter, you are weighing the sample in gram, isn't it? Because it is solid or non-volatile liquid, and put it in the crucible, and then you determine. Here the sample is a gaseous sample or volatile liquid sample. So therefore, you cannot weigh the sample and put into the bomb calorimeter. So that is why these are two different types of calorimeter for different type of sample. The bomb calorimeter is required. It is for solid fuel and non-volatile liquid fuel. The gas calorimeter, in which the Boyle's gas calorimeter is the best one, isn't it? So it gives you the calorific value of a non-volatile liquid and a gas fuel. So gas fuel, that is why gaseous fuel cannot be measured or cannot be weighed in terms of gram and put into the bomb calorimeter. So both of them, they give very good values for HCV, and therefore then LCV, isn't it? Both of them give good values, isn't it? But the type of the sample is different for Boy's gas calorimeter and Boy's gas calorimeter and the bomb calorimeter. So that is the difference between the two, and both of them give you a good accurate values of HCV as well as then LCV. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Now coming over to solid fuel, you see, I will upload all these slides tomorrow, that is on Friday, isn't it? After taking, though there is a holiday tomorrow, but I will engage those class. One class I have, one lecture class. So after that class, I will, after that class, I will upload these slides. So you can go through this. So these are, you see, coal, as I told you, coal is also a fossil fuel, isn't it? Which has been generated or formed in this form when the vegetation has been buried inside the earth for a longer time, isn't it? For a long time, it is the vegetation or the plant has been buried into the earth, and due to certain processes, it has got converted into coal. That is why we call it the fossil fuel. So when the wood is buried into the earth for certain time, then the transformation of wood takes place. Transformation of wood, there are various stages of coalification or coal formation from the wood. First of all, into the wood, more water is added, isn't it? More water is added. So the log of water, the log of food, etc., they absorb water and decay process starts. The first stage of coal formation is known as peat formation. The first one is peat formation. Then after longer time, the second stage coal formation takes place, where water will be lost, isn't it? Water will be lost, and then the solid, semi-solid material which was peat again started getting converted into solid coal, isn't it? The second stage of coal formation is known as lignite. So lignite, the decay has started at the stage of peat, then more decay has taken place in the formation of lignite, but still lots of the larger wood structure is still is there. And then the third stage qualification is the formation of bituminous coal. It is the bituminous coal which we obtain from mining, from our most of the mines in the world. Whatever we are digging out, it is bituminous coal. Yeah, even the bituminous coal has three types of layer, isn't it? Subbituminous, semi-bituminous, and bituminous, isn't it? But still it is taken as one form. So from wood, it gets converted to peat by addition of more water. Then in the second stage conversion, the peat gets converted into lignite, where water is lost, and then and the decay process has begun. More decay will take place, and therefore lignite is formed, and from lignite you get bituminous type of coal. It is the bituminous type of coal which is obtained from the most of the mines. Then if this coal is remain there for a very long time, then you get anthracite coal. Anthracite is the final and the best form of the coal, isn't it? Where carbon content is more than 92 to 95%, is total carbon is there. But whatever we generally obtain, and this anthracite coal is obtained only in certain regions, not in the Jharkhand or Bihar, etc., isn't it? In our most of the mines and the mines world over, we are getting the bituminous type of coal. So every bituminous mine has three types of coal there: the subbituminous, semi-bituminous, and bituminous. So largely we are getting bituminous type of coal. So this is, I will upload all these slides so you can read this, isn't it? And I will also upload the complete notes. So therefore, you'll be able to know that. You'll find that, yes, when you obtain bituminous coal or anthracite, you have to grade this coal. And according to the grade of the coal, the price is fixed, isn't it? Price is fixed. You know, A grade, B grade, C grade, D grade, E grade, and F grade. F grade is subbituminous generally. Subbituminous coal is termed as a F grade, isn't it? Whatever we are getting in our minds, it is D grade coal. D grade coal we are generally getting. A is the anthracite type of coal, isn't it? But rather it is also bituminous because we are comparing only those coal which are obtained from the Indian coal-based Indian mines. So generally it is A, B, C, and we are getting D type, C and D type of bituminous coal we are mostly getting here. Now this grading is done on various parameters such as the chemical composition of the coal, especially the amount of carbon present there, amount of sulfur present there. Because if sulfur is there, that coal is taken as considered as a poor coal, because then it will be ignited, it will give you if more ash content is there, isn't it? That is non-combustible matter. That coal is also a poor coal, and it is graded in E grade or F grade. So therefore, certain parameters are determined, and on the basis of those parameters, grading is done. You see, the calorific value of anthracite coal is much higher, isn't it? It is more than 8,000 to 9,000 kilocalories per kg of the anthracite, remaining from 2,500 onward up to 6,500. It is bituminous type of coal. So that is why, and this grading is done on the basis of certain parameters, including the chemical analysis. But the most important parameter is percentage of carbon, percentage of sulfur, isn't it? And the percentage of ash content. These are the three main parameters on which the grading of the coal is done. Because if you have high sulfur content, it will produce obnoxious gases, produce climatic hazard. At the same time, if you have a good amount of the non-combustible matter or ash content, then that coal is also poor coal. So certain parameters are measured. The primary composition of coal is carbon. The secondary is hydrogen, sulfur, oxygen, and nitrogen. So generally, these elements are present along with a good amount of, depending upon the nature of the coal, good amount of oxides of metal iron are also there. Oxides of metal iron or non-combustible material is also there. We have listed only the combustible material because carbon will undergo combustion, hydrogen will go under combustion, sulfur will go under combustion, oxygen will help in combustion, and nitrogen will undergo combustion process. So we have only listed here the composition of the combustible coal, isn't it? But still, in addition to this, you have metal oxides, which is non-combustible or ash content. That is also there. You see, this is the anthracite coal, very hard, tough surface, shining surface is there. Then you have the bituminous coal, non-shining surfaces, and a rough surface is there, isn't it? And this is very hard. It is like a rock. This is also very hard, but it is still not as hard as that of anthracite. The composition along with the tetrahedral carbon, you have this type of structure also in the bituminous type of coal. In case of anthracite coal, mostly you have a tetrahedral carbon. Here you have a good amount of non-tetrahedral or the polycyclic hydrocarbons, isn't it? As also there in bituminous type of coal, which was primarily the composition of wood. So this is still there. The wood component is also still there. Some amount of compounds which are present in the wood, lignin, etc. The polycyclic hydrocarbons are still there. Now the composition of various type of coal, I will upload this. The volatile matter content, carbon content, hydrogen content, oxygen and sulfur content. This is common coal composition. I will upload this slide, anthracite 92 to 95%, hydrogen is 3 to 4%, oxygen 2 to 3, nitrogen is 0 to 2, that is maybe nil or, but here sulfur content is not given. Sulfur content is generally very close to nitrogen content. Then the moisture content. This is the calorific value of anthracite, bituminous type of coal, and you can see the lignite and peat. All these are there. Then, as I have told you, the coal has to be analyzed. First, on the basis of this analysis, you will be able to know that how much ash content is there, how much carbon is there, how much sulfur is there. And on the basis of these important parameters, the grading of coal is done. And from the grading of the coal, the price of the coal is decided. So there are two types of coal analysis. One is proximate analysis, another is ultimate analysis. Ultimate analysis requires complete analysis. The percentage of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, moisture content, ash content, isn't it? Volatile matter content. All is determined separately, isn't it? And with accuracy, that is ultimate analysis. In the proximate analysis, the three parameters are determined. Here you can see the three parameters are determined for proximate analysis. One is percent moisture content, then percent volatile matter content, and percent ash content. These three parameters are determined experimentally. Then the sum of all these parameters is subtracted from 100, and whatever you get is taken as fixed carbon. Now this fixed carbon also has the percentage of hydrogen, nitrogen and sulfur into it. But all of them, they give you some heat, therefore it is taken as fixed carbon. So it is a indirect calculation of fixed carbon in the coal, which is done by the proximate analysis. But why proximate analysis is done? Because it is easy to be carried out near the coal mines. No large equipments are not needed. Only simple experiment equipment you can determine the volatile matter content, moisture content and the ash content. And from there you can determine indirectly the percentage of fixed carbon, and you can decide the sulfur content also you will determine from the bomb calorimeter, and then you will be able to know the you can grade your coal accordingly. So for doing these parameters, let us come first of all to the moisture content. It is determined in a hot air oven by knowing the air dried, known mass of air dried coal is taken, coal powder, then it is heated in a crucible at 110 degrees centigrade in a hot air oven, then it is cooled down in the desiccator, and then the loss of weight is determined, which is multiplied by 100 and divided by weight of coal initially taken. So moisture percentage of moisture will be known to you. Then to the same bowl for which you have taken the moisture content you have determined, you put it into a furnace in a crucible, again in the same crucible, and put a lid over it. The lid of the crucible is such that it is perforated. So it will not allow the combustion to take place, but will allow the volatile matter of the coal to go out. So it is heated for 7 minutes at 925 degrees centigrade in a muffled furnace, and then it is cooled down in a desiccator, and then loss of weight of the moisture free coal. Loss of weight of moisture free coal multiplied by what is happened? You have to loss of weight of moisture free. What you have done? You have taken out the moisture, and then you have weighed it, then you have heated it muffled furnace, then you have to determine the difference of the weight multiplied by 100 and divided by weight of moisture free coal taken. So this will give you the percent volatile matter content. Then to the same setup, you take out the lid, ढक्कन उसका निकाल के ले लेंगे क्रूसिबल का, and then you heat it in at 700 to 800 degrees centigrade in the same muffled furnace in presence of air, because we have removed the lid. So now this is open for combustion. So combustion will take place. We have to repeat it 2 or 3 times so that nothing is left. All black spots go, and then you take it out, and whatever remaining weight is there, that is because of ash content or non-combustible material. So you weight divided by weight of coal initially taken and then multiplied by 100, you will get the ash content. So you can determine, this I have already told you, you know the moisture content, ash content, volatile matter content. You add up all of them, subtract from 100, it will be fixed carbon. Then these are certain parameters, significance of various parameters. This I will upload again, and there is no need to discuss it here. These are certain moisture content. This is your sulfur content. Sulfur is determined by a bomb calorimeter. If you remember here, I have told you that in the bomb calorimeter, what you do, after every experiment you wash it, because whatever sulfur is there, that has converted into sulfuric acid, and then it is mixed with metal ions here, which are present in this, and it has been converted into sulfates. So then you wash it in order to clean your crucible and clean your bomb calorimeter. You wash it in 0.1 normal nitric acid. That is why you are not washing in sulfuric acid, because from this washings, isn't it? You filter the washing, isn't it? And so whatever sulfates are there, that will be reconverted into sulfuric acid. When you wash it with 0.1 normal nitric acid, the sulfate will be converted into sulfuric acid. And then it will be there in the form of sulfuric acid. Then now you add excess of barium chloride into it. So barium sulfate will be precipitated. Now you take the filtrate, add excess of barium chloride. So whatever sulfates are there, that will be converted into barium sulfate. You filter this precipitate, wash it several times so that any other ions is sticking on the sulfate, they are washed, and then the barium sulfate, they are washed, and therefore after that you dry it at 110 degrees centigrade, and whatever amount is now there, that is the amount of sulfate present in this X gram of the sample. So sulfur content you can also determine here. So sulfur you determine like this. Then coming over to ultimate analysis, here you determine the carbon and hydrogen separately. You do this in this assembly. The time is not there now. I will upload this slide, and those who want to discuss it later, we will discuss it later. Here what you do, you have a cold sample here, which is air dried, isn't it? And which is where all the moisture has been removed, isn't it? All the moisture has been removed by heating at 110 degrees centigrade. So you have removed the moisture. Now you have put it here, a known amount of sample in the tubular furnace, and you heat it at 900 degrees centigrade, and for log. So what will happen? The combustion is required. Combustion of coal will take place. Now, for combustion, oxygen is required, but the product of combustion are such that is, this is carbon dioxide and water. So whatever oxygen you are supplying here, it should be free from the water molecule and even the trace of carbon dioxide. So in the first trap here, the carbon dioxide is absorbed, which is there in, even if trace of air is there in the trace of or air or oxygen, if it contains carbon dioxide, that will be absorbed by soda lime, that is calcium oxide. So this calcium oxide will react with the carbon dioxide, producing calcium carbonate. So the carbon dioxide is removed. Then it enters into, then this enters into this tube. Now this oxygen is free from, which is enters here, is free from carbon dioxide. Now it goes into this trap, which is anhydrous sulfuric acid, or you can also put calcium chloride anhydrous into this place of this. So whatever moisture is there, that will be absorbed by sulfuric acid or calcium chloride tube, anhydrous tube, and then it enters into this. So the oxygen which is entering here for the combustion process, it is free from carbon dioxide and moisture. Why it is needed? Because then otherwise it will be added into the combustion product of carbon and hydrogen. So that is why which you are determining. So you have removed the trace of carbon dioxide and water from here. Then you have whatever combustion will take place, carbon dioxide and water will come here. Water will be absorbed in this calcium chloride tube. You know the weight of this tube along with the calcium chloride. So increase in the weight of calcium chloride tube will give you the measure of how much water has been produced as the result of combustion reaction. Similarly, then the gas, the combustion product will come into this tube where you have potassium hydroxide. So it will react with potassium hydroxide and with the carbon dioxide, and it will form potassium carbonate, and therefore increase in the weight of this will give you the amount of carbon dioxide produced as a result of combustion process. Then the extra gases of oxygen and oxides of nitrogen, sulfur, it will pass out from this tube. So in this way you will be able to know the carbon and hydrogen. The slide is given here. Then determination of nitrogen. Nitrogen is determined by Gildan method, and this I will upload. You will be able to know. Gildan method already it is known to you. Sulfur I have told you. Then the approximate analysis, that is oxygen content is determined by the subtracting entire things from 100, percentage of oxygen will be known to you. Then now the time is up, so I'm closing this. I will have noted down. So I first of all stop the recording.